And good evening, and welcome back to the panel room. It is a special NaNoWriMo episode where we're going to be coming in and talking all about how to get ready for NaNoWriMo, what is NaNoWriMo, and what can we do as a part of the exercise. So before we get started and dive into the fun, I'm Jim Nettles. I'll be your moderator this evening, but I'm going to allow my other guests to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Jeannie. You're up first.
Oh, those A's. Jeanne Adams here. You can find me at jeanneadams.com. I write paranormal romantic suspense, urban fantasy, and space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott.
Elle Marie.
Hi, I'm Elle Marie Wood. I'm a psychological horror author, and you can find me at www.elmariewood.com.
Gail.
Hi, I'm Gail Z Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail Z Martin, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, steampunk, and more. And as Morgan Bryce, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance.
And Nancy.
And I'm Nancy Northcott. Pretty much a lifelong history, comic books, and science fiction and fantasy geek. I love research, which is what I'm going to talk about tonight. I write the historical fantasy War King's Honor trilogy, which is above my head. For Falstaff Books. I've also written several subgenres of romance, and I write the Outcast Station science fiction mystery series with my buddy Jeanne Adams.
So let's talk a little bit about NaNoWriMo. What is it? So for those of you who may have never done it, it's National Novel Writing Month. And so it's the month of November, and it tries to prompt everybody who is involved to go out there and crank out a short 50,000 word novel during the month. So the goal is to write 50,000 words during the month. Don't have to all be good words, just, at least get the words in the word count out there. And it's a really interesting nonprofit structure. And it's all designed about giving you tools for people who are trying to write. It is about giving accountability. It's creating a support structure and really creates an interesting community for people who are writers or interested in becoming writers, or even just trying to write for their own edification to see if they can do it. And so Nano is a great challenge, happens twice a year. Like I say, the one that's coming up now is November. And then they also do it again in April. So, looking around and from everybody that's here, let's talk a little bit about what you think Nano is good for. Who would be an ideal person to write for Nano? What are they going to get out of it? So, Nancy, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, I'll say up front that I have not done NaNoWriMo. I have done writing blitzes over the years, and I think it's pretty much the same thing, but with more structure and lasts longer. And to me, the benefit of doing that is it forces you to turn off your internal editor. Because if you don't turn off your internal editor, you're not going to make whatever word count goal you set. And for someone like me who sees an interesting fact and will follow it down a series of rabbit holes into the next dimension, it's really good to go, no, you cannot do that right now. Do this. And so to me, people who are having trouble just blitzing words onto the page might benefit a lot from it.
What do you think, Gail?
I think it's great for somebody who feels stuck. Maybe they are already working on a book and life has just gotten in the way, and this gives them one more reason to push through, or the accountability, or just the idea of doing something with a group to get themselves unstuck. That's how I've seen a lot of people comment about having used it. Or for somebody who has always said they were going to write a book and just never quite got around to it, it's a structured way to get a good running start at it. Maybe their book is going to be longer. Maybe they get halfway through it and realize this isn't the book they always intended to write, it's something else, but it gets them putting words on paper, and nothing happens until you put words on paper.
Anything you want to add to that, Elle Marie?
I think of it kind of like exercising in a group as opposed to exercising at home alone. You have people around you who are sweating alongside you, who are panting, who are, having a good time, struggling. You have all these different ways to look at what's going on in the room, but inherently you don't want to be that person who's not doing it, who's stopped, who is standing still. You want to keep up. And it's not so much the notion of, you know, I don't want to say keeping up in terms of keeping up with someone else's progress, but if you join up for something and everyone else takes off from the line and you're still standing there, you want to make sure you can catch up and keep with the pack at least. It's an internal accountability that really will push us forward, and all of us have it. How it triggers is a different thing, but it will trigger if you're in a room where everyone else is doing something. You will say to yourself, well, I should be doing something too. So.
Mhm.
And Jeannie, because I know you've done Nano.
Well, I think everybody's got a piece of it that one of the things that I found it most valuable for is, as Gail said, is a kickstart. But I also found it incredibly valuable, as Nancy said, for turning off that internal editor. And in fact, that's probably the thing that it was most valuable to me for, was, okay, I can't think about whether those are good pages or not. I can't think about whether the story is shaping the way I want it to shape. I've just got to keep moving. And as somebody who had a hard time initially getting all the way to the end, that was incredibly valuable for me to know that I couldn't stop and go back and finesse and massage and perfect, because I'm a perfectionist about that. But I had to go all the way to the end. Wow, it so taught me that for me as a writer, the best thing I can do is get all the way to the end before I start to edit.
So one of the things I want to dive into before we talk about it is I want to get into, how do you prepare for it? So everybody here has written novels, novellas. You've gone through and cranked out complete works. So if you're looking at coming in and doing Nano and you're wanting to gear yourself and be ready to start, day one, I want to be putting words on paper. I want to be getting stuff out the door. And I know we've got a good mixture here of pantsers versus plotters. So I think one of the things that's really helpful to do maybe is to talk a little bit, for anybody who's not that familiar with it, what's the difference? And what's the structure you usually like to use when you're getting ready to start telling a story? So Gail, I'm going to go to you first, since you produce, 8 million words a month, at least a book a week.
Or something like that. Yeah. One of the things I've learned about me, and your mileage may vary, but for me to be able to write quickly, I have to have a solid outline. Now, that doesn't have to be hundreds of pages. That can sometimes be 3 pages, maybe 10 pages for a long book. But I need to know in a good bit of detail where the story is going, what the characters are going to be doing, and what's going to happen chapter to chapter. It doesn't mean that doesn't change after I get going, or that I don't see some things I didn't know were going to happen and put those in. But if I have to just stare at a blank page until I can figure out where this goes next, it's going to take a whole lot longer than if I have a roadmap of where I think it's going to go. And so that's a key thing to me, is having thought through the characters. Who are they? Where did they come from? Why are they here? What do they want? Who wants to stop them from getting what they want? Who do they like? Who likes them? Whatever is appropriate to the story. Who's the big bad? Same set of questions for them. What's the setting? The more I can have that nailed down in my head, even if it's because I've thought about it while I'm driving to the grocery store, or in other years, I've thought about it while I'm on a road trip and driving my 200-mile stretch. I'm that much more prepared when I sit down in front of the keyboard to actually just start typing and telling the story that's come to life in my head, than if I don't do that and then I sit at a keyboard and I have to do all of that now while I'm at the keyboard wasting actual writing time.
So what about you, Elle Marie? We know that you structure and plot extensively.
Oh, yes, sure. No, I'm a pantser through and through. I mean, there were so many words that Gail said that made my palms sweat, because I respect the process. I respect her process. And I recognize that there is truly, there are pantsers and there are outliners. And the camps, we're you just have to respect each other's process. But yes, my hands were sweating. You said 3 pages and that was short. And I'm like, no. I just, there are things that pantsers need to know. We do open up a blank screen. At least I do. I open up a blank screen and I'm incredibly excited to see what am I going to put on there? It's going to be so good. And I just start. And then whatever comes out came out. and it's the way that, that's the way that I think. I sort of allow the story to manifest as I'm typing. I've always made the joke that if, because there was a software, the verbal software you can use and sort of have it type onto the screen and
Dragon and
yeah. And my fingers like to feel the keys, my fingers they know what they want to say. And I'm just kind of watching and seeing what comes up. So do we know some things? Sure. We do know a couple, at least I know a couple things as I'm pantsing. Let's make up a new word. Why not? So I know my ending. I usually start with my ending. Not that I write my ending, but I know what's going to be. Where do we end up? And then my next big question is why? So and that's where Gail and I probably meet. I may think of what the why is while I'm driving to the supermarket or, doing some mundane task. And now I know why, I know where we end up, and I'll come back. I will have not written any of that down. I just know what it is. And I begin typing. So I save a lot of that time in the planning and use it in the actual writing process. But I'll tell you, I've tried to write the way that Gail and other outliners they write. I literally can't do it. It's a thing. It truly is. You're one or the other. And there may be elements you share, but I cannot do what Gail does and what other outliners do. It's just not, for me, a natural process. So.
And my heartbeat is speeding up hearing you talk about, I just sit in front of this blank screen and it moves me, and I'm going, yeah, it moves me to go running out the door because it's a blank screen.
I love it. That's perfect. And that's the beauty of writing, I think. That's the beauty of getting together and getting with like-minded people, because like-minded doesn't mean that we do it the same way. We just love doing what we do. It's interesting to see the different planning processes that go on. So, yeah.
But I think that's a big thing about Nano is I think we kind of take it for granted in our cluster that there are other crazy writer people we can talk to and they understand this stuff. And for many, many, if not most people, they don't hang out with all other writers. Their friends and family are not all doing this for a living. It is a weird way to work. And so nobody understands them when they go, I'm part of the way through chapter 3 and I'm not sure how to get him, and they go, and you want me to do what? So I think Nano is also that community of other crazy writer people who understand why you're stuck or whatever. I think that's, or why the pantsing isn't working this time. And oh my God, I might have to plot, or vice versa.
Or I have to take I could easily contact you and say, I just got my character outside and I don't know where to go with him. And I pants and you outline and you'd still know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter. And that's the beauty of it.
And sometimes the answer is kill somebody. You'll feel better, and then you'll know what to do.
You do know that's always my answer.
Blow something up or kill somebody. Nancy knows this about me. I blow
I'm like,
stuff.
what kind of panel do you think this is? Wait a minute, you know who you have on here. Kill somebody is usually right. I'm like,
Raymond Chandler, somebody runs through the door with a gun. Works every time.
Or there's romance, sex fixes everything. Or causes the problem, one or the other. So Jeannie, what about you?
Well, at heart, I'm a pantser. I love the process of just starting in the middle and going. Now, that said, the absolute best advice I ever got on writing was there's only one way to write a good book, and that's your way. I tried being a plotter. Does not work for me. I have a friend who used to do 2x2 sticky notes, and she'd say, chapter 1, scene 1, turn the sticky over, chapter 1, scene 2. And when she had a stack of sticky notes this big, she'd flip it all over and sit down and write the book. I'd be like, I already know what happens. I'm not interested in writing the book.
right.
But I did have to learn I call it plotting, because I had to learn how to at least get a roadmap, like Gail said, even if it's only, I know I'm going to Arizona. And a friend of ours, and Nancy and I will recognize this, a friend of ours uses the W plot. It's really literally just a W. So you know where you start, you know where stuff gets really bad. Oh, it looks like it's getting a little bit better. Nope, it's really, really bad. And then it's the dead run to the end. As long as I have this and I can figure out where I start and where I end, the rest of it usually can fill itself in. The other thing I had to learn though, was I had to learn how to write faster. And the most important thing I ever learned, and Elmarie, you referenced this, was I have to know the ending. Because I'll start wandering. If I'm going to Arizona, I'll get stuck in St. Louis, man, and Dallas, and kind of wander through New Mexico. I've got to know where I'm going. And I found this book, Rachel Aaron's 2000 to 10,000. And that's actually the most important thing I learned from that book. It's a quick read. It's really interesting. She's a science fiction writer, is know what the end is. And if you know what the end is, no matter where you start, if you're one of those odd people who like writes things out of sequence, can't do that. That makes me insane. But some people do. You know where to place it in if you know where you're going. And for me, I had to learn how to at least plot a little bit because I had deadlines. I couldn't take the time that the first few books I wrote before I was published, didn't matter how long it took. It could, like Gail said, it could take 20 years. Who cares? You know, it's fine. But when your editor and publisher says, I need this by the 21st of December, and it is the 1st of October, you better get a move on. And so for me, I had to know where I was going, and I had to plot just enough to know the turning points so that I had a roadmap. I've tried it all sorts of different ways because I teach a class on plotting. I've tried it all kinds of different ways just to see if they work. They don't. I just need to know where I'm going. I just need the roadmap.
What about you, Nancy?
I need a roadmap too. I used to be a total pantser. I would usually get the idea for the opening of the book, and I would sit down and just start writing. And in some ways that is more exciting and it is more fun. But I find that I meander into distant galaxies and over mountains and into mines before I get back on the track to what's going to get me to the next turning point in the story. So I use that same W plot chart that Jeannie was doing, and it's got the major turning points in the story and it's got the major developments in between. But those are subject to change. And I spent 2.5 hours yesterday in a brainstorming session with some people because the heroine's conflict didn't feel right. And this is me sitting down and planning it, but it's that little voice in the back of your head that goes, this is not hanging together the way you need it to hang together. And so luckily we didn't have to change anything drastic, but we ironed out the problem. And last week I was coming toward the end of the book, and the heroes had a particular problem kind of since the beginning of the book, and it's been getting worse. And I had this big catastrophic event, and I thought, what if I make this really awful for him? And so then I have to sit down and think, okay, if I make this really awful for him, how does it ripple through and affect the rest of the plot and the other characters? So I'm mostly a plotter now because that's the only thing that keeps me from just going off like a ping pong ball on Ricochet, and it gives me some sense of purpose. But I do change things and I do adapt as I go through.
Well, and
my Pantsers Unite shirt. I have a shirt that says Pantsers Unite on it. I'm gonna convert some people one of these days, I promise.
I thought it was Pantsers Disunite. What
Untie.
I'm gonna wear my shirt for the next panel. You'll see.
Yeah, I'm one of I actually do somewhere in the middle myself, because I mean, I will go in if I'm trying to figure out whether a story is going to work. If I'm trying to figure out who a character is, I'll just sit down and write. I will totally pants it, come up with something and say, oh, that works, or it doesn't. And it's words that occasionally I may salvage some little bit of that, but it's me going through that exploratory process. So then I can go out and say, okay, here's my outline. Here's, whether it's the W method, whether it's the good old, story beats method, whether it's just, I started here, I end here, and I need to make sure I see these couple of things so that ending makes sense. I usually have got something out there for an outline, but if I'm not sure, if I have no idea where I'm going or if it's going to work or not, I'll sit down and pant something out and sometimes it's a couple of thousand words. Sometimes it's significantly longer. I mean, I've written 100,000 words that I threw the entirety of it away because it didn't work. And that's when you start learning the tools that work and outlines and things like that. So,
Well, and that's something to remember about the whole concept of writing quickly. You have to ask yourself, why do you need to write quickly? If you're not published yet, if you're just writing for fun, then maybe you can let some of that pressure off, other than, okay, Nano inspires you to write every day. I write as fast as I do, first of all, after being published for 14 years. I didn't start out this way. It took me 20 years to get the first book out and into the world. My husband and I do this full time for a living. So, bringing out new work means paying the mortgage. There's a significant difference in that as opposed to writing for fun. And I think, if you don't have to have that sense of, I need to bring a new book out, let yourself off the hook, especially this year. You don't need any more stress. Yeah. So be inspired to hit your word count. But if, like, I have to outline so much because I don't have the time to have to throw a lot away. Right. I can't afford to spend a whole day and then throw it out because, I didn't like the way that went. I need to know, I might throw out a paragraph here or there, but I can't lose that kind of time. If you're not in that situation, and you probably aren't, then just take the pressure off and go have fun and write what you write, and it'll start to snowball.
And I think that's the point of NaNoWriMo. Is to sort of let yourself off the hook, unlock the gates, let yourself just play with some idea. And if you write 100,000 words that you never do anything else with, that's just fine. Getting those muscles trained, it's like the analogy El Marie used of going to the gym. Getting those muscles trained to write every single day, even if you write something different, a short story every single day. That's the whole point of NaNoWriMo, is to just go and have fun and exercise the muscles and see if you even like doing it. Because there are a lot of people who say, oh, I really want to write a book someday. And then they try NaNoWriMo and go, that stuff's hard.
Right.
Because you're looking at about to hit the 50,000 words, you're looking at about 1,700 words a day. And for some people that are talking, in terms of if I can get 200 or 300 a day, I'm good. I think that one of the things in looking at saying, did I win Nano, is all about, did you get something out of it? Did you get some routine? If you get up to that 50,000 words, fantastic. But it's more a matter of, what did you get out of the exercise? So that's the one thing I'd lead into with this.
I think you also can't measure yourself if you're doing this around a full-time job or little kids or being a caregiver. If it's not your full-time job to write books, then let yourself off the hook on how many words per day you're going to get. If all you get is that hour at lunchtime to sit and type on your phone, okay, then what you get is good. Just do it every day. That's why it took 20 years to get my first book finished and out the door, because life kept happening. Right. I started it when I was 19. It came out when I was 45.
The thing, all these points are fantastic. And one thing I want to add to that is that it's not just how many words, it's not just winning. It's not any of those things, at least not in their entirety. You need to want to do your work. You need to crave writing, miss it when you've gone to bed, wish all day through the meetings you have, through the meal prep, through whatever's going on, wish you could be writing instead. And when you get the chance to do it, I mean, you'll be surprised how productive you'll be, but that doesn't always mean productive in terms of word count. You may put only 300 words on the page that day, but in your mind, you have figured out the problem, this conflict you've been just stressing over not getting done. Now you're ready. You're just not at that point in the story yet, but you thought it through, or you did some fantastic research that, you hadn't gotten to the bottom of yet. Yeah. And you got that done. And then you wrote some notes at the end of your piece to say, okay, don't forget to add such and such, whatever. It's the craving, it's the desire to do the work that will drive you. And during Nano and after. Nano should kickstart it, should, you know, ignite the fire. But if you like, if it starts to really burn, I call our writing and what we do, you know, why we continue to do it all the time, I call it the burn. Like, I must write my stories. I must write my books. And I mean, I had life exists, right? I mean, was really trying to make a name for myself in the beginning of the 2000s. Then I said, well, listen, at some point I need to start this family I planned to start, you know, took some time off. I write psychological horror. So, you know, for me, my characters like to come alive, you know, and so in that way, alive with a baby, that really wasn't, I said I write horror. So that's not, that wasn't fun. So somebody had to take a break. So that had to be the horror. But every day I felt like, oh, I gotta write something. And I mean, I literally was writing, I think I might have mentioned this to you before, but I was writing articles for a local newspaper about how to trim your grass, how to keep your grass green. I don't even trim the grass. You know, that's not what I do in my house. I don't mow. I kill every plant. Let's put it like that. So, but I wrote that stuff because I couldn't write my other stuff, but the burn was like eating me up.
Yeah.
So when I got the chance to write again, the stuff I like to write, of course, I was able to just flow. You need to cultivate that burn. If you don't feel it, then you're forcing yourself. That's how I look at it.
Mhm.
Well, I think you've got such a great point there too, is that, you know, I remember sitting in meetings, lifting the second or third page of my notepad and writing an idea down.
Yep.
That would go and paying perfect attention to what was going, but I'm writing, you know, underneath my pad. I'm like, fix this scene because now I know what to do.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Now, one of the things Nancy referenced earlier, though, too, was sometimes you get into a story and until you start, a la our pantsers, Elmarie, you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And you get into the story and suddenly you need to know if in 16th century France, they actually had something. Carriages, did they use carriages? You have to go look it up. And as Nancy did indicate, it is sometimes a rabbit hole. But also it's something you need to do. Well, that's not putting words on the page, but it's part of writing.
Yes.
And so I think I really respect and appreciate NaNoWriMo, and I think it's awesome. But there's also times when putting words on the page is counterproductive because you need to go do a little research.
Well,
Mhm.
and that's where I was going to go next. So, Nancy, you know, because you are definitively a research hound, how do you go about, you know, when you've got an idea, starting the research process and making sure that the rabbit holes you go down are productive? Because we all know when you start going down certain rabbit holes, you can spend days down there and come up going, wow, I had no idea that I'd find the Ark of the Covenant. Problem is, I was researching,
I wasn't even looking for it.
wasn't looking for it, found the Ark, but I had to put it
Species of
back because I
bear.
was, you know, I was looking for
Looking for
groundhogs.
fluffy bunnies and yeah.
Well, I get a lot of people who say to me in Romance Writers of America circles, you know, I'd really love to write a historical, but I don't know anything about history. Now, as a lifelong history geek, I find this incomprehensible. But I also know that if you come at it with a goal in mind, it's not quite so overwhelming. Like the Herald of Day, I don't have the mirror thing. The Herald of Day is set in 17th century England. And that is not a period I knew a lot about. There are various reasons for setting the story there. So I started with England in the reign of Charles II, and I read that. And that was a good social history of the period. Then I read Antonia Fraser's biography of Charles II, which was a good political history of the period. And then I read a book on life in 17th century London. And then I had enough to start. So I had enough that I could go through and write and leave little details to check later. And I think that applies to any subject. If you pick a good general survey of it, then look at the specific aspect of it that you're using, and then look at one other thing that complements that. You don't have to read enough to get a PhD, before you start, you know?
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. And so as far as avoiding rabbit holes, you just kind of have to say, okay, this isn't getting me anywhere. And I'm not the best person to do that. I wrote a book that had a running battle down Whitehall to Westminster Abbey, and I spent a day and a half trying to figure out when the wall around the Abbey complex and the Palace of Westminster came down. Because if it's still there, my people have to blow it up. And finally, my son said, and he's an adult, and he said, are you still on that? And I said, look, this is important. There are people on the planet who know this. And he's like, but how many people on the planet who are not you care? It's like,
One of them will find the book.
That's what I'm saying. You'd be surprised, and that you don't want to be embarrassed by someone saying, yeah, but.
yeah, you don't. But you know, I took it, I thought about it, and I thought, okay, you've looked for a day and a half on this. You've asked a medievalist who doesn't know. How many people who are going to read your book realistically are going to know whether you're right or wrong? And maybe it's time to just stop and write the fight scene. And so I think you have to kind of go down the rabbit hole a little way, because then you know that you went and you looked. But don't let the rabbit hole suck you down into the rabbit hole below that, and the rabbit hole below that, and the magma at the center of the earth. You know, you at some point you have to go, yeah, I'm the only person who cares. Let's move on. So does that answer your question?
Well, and so as part of your research, would you agree that one of the things, if you're going to be writing in a particular space or a particular genre, you better be reading in it?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I can't tell you, one of the things that makes me maddest is when somebody who has never read a romance says, well, I'm going to write a romance because they're really easy to sell and I'm going to make a lot of money. And it's like, yeah, bring it. Let's see you do that. You just go right ahead. And the same thing applies to science fiction and horror and mystery, because you don't know the tropes if you don't read the genre. And the importance of the tropes is they're what set up reader expectations. And if you don't meet reader expectations, then the reader is, if it's a print book, not so much if it's on an e-reader, is going to fling your book across the room at some point and never read anything else you write. So I do think it's important to read whatever you write.
And it's okay to subvert those tropes, but you have to know what they are before you change them, because otherwise your reader will understand that you just didn't know what you were talking about, not that you cleverly did this unique thing.
Right.
Yes,
I think there's so many people who think that, well, I'll just write this. I don't need to do any research because it's different and it's new. And you're like, not so much.
No, experimental doesn't mean you didn't look, you know, you just try, you know, experimental novel can be done, right? But you still, again, like you said, Gail, you have to know what you're not going to talk about, or what you're going to flip on its head, or what you're, you know, you can't, for example, I mean, vampires are undead, so you can't just make them not be undead, just have some sort of blood disease. Now that's an issue. That's not, I mean, we're not talking about a vampire. We're talking about something else. So it's cool if you want to create something else, but don't call it a vampire if you're not talking about a vampire in any way. I mean, have respect for the genre that you're writing in. You know, that's part of writing as well. I mean, I'm a firm believer of you should read the classics. The new stuff is playing games. I mean, you know, Twilight, we have sparkling vampires. Yes, if that's your only vampire story, you're misguided. You have no idea what vampires do. Pick up Dracula. There we go. You know, read the original, you know, or read one of the originals. And so I just kind of feel like you have to have respect for the genre you're going to write in. You know, I mean, you can't just, and I'm all for cross genre. I'm all for stretching your legs and trying something new. But again, it's the respect level.
Well, I remember when somebody said that they really thought it was so unique that in my epic fantasy books that are set in a quasi-medieval setting, that this was just so unique that I had vampires, which you didn't really see outside of urban fantasy. And I'm going, Vlad the Impaler, 1469 or whatever it was. No.
Wow.
They were medieval before medieval was cool. Yeah. But again,
I think
somebody who didn't know the tropes, didn't know the genre.
And I think one of the great things about something like Nano is you can you can maybe sit down and play with a trope that's different, or play with
Mhm.
something that you've not done before.
Mhm.
One of the things that I did in Nano was tried to write a historical. Not very good at it.
Mhm.
But you know, that was seriously important to learn,
Mhm.
because I have a lot of ideas that could sit there in a different time period. I discovered that I'm much better at reaching into the future and hypothesizing things that might become, rather than, wow, they pinned up things as opposed to having buttons. That was pretty freaky. And so something like Nano, though, if you're already a writer, Nano can be something where you go play in a different,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
Elmarie, your genre of psychological horror, I think, as Nancy referenced, there are a lot of people who think, oh, I can write horror. Horror is just like those bloody gore movies. I can write that. I think almost as much as romance, people diss horror and think that they can just go write it because it's easy.
Yep.
Oh my Lord.
Right, and
Well,
it's amazing to me that they think it's just gore. I
Yeah.
don't. I write the quiet side of horror, and a lot of people don't even know what I'm talking about. And I'm just thinking, really? And
Yeah.
it's stunning to me. You know, it just surprises me. But again, it goes back to not that you need to. Oh, Nancy, didn't you say that you don't have to research to get a PhD in something? However, you should have read something. You know, and there's no excuse these days. We have short stories that are out. You know, there's fan fiction, for goodness sakes. You could try, you know, because they're not doing poorly on some of this stuff as well. I mean, some of that stuff is pretty good. So you can read these things and say, oh, that's what a psychological horror story sounds like. That's
But one of the fun things about Nano is that if you normally write light comedy, and this whole current situation has depressed the ever loving hell out of you, you can go try your hand at a little horror.
why not? Stretching your legs is important. I think as all of us, we have to try sometimes to do something that's outside of our wheelhouse. I mean, science fiction is not my thing, right? But I tried a little section, and I had so much research. I can't even tell you the rabbit holes I went down, days upon days trying to figure out what I saw the video. I don't know if you guys, I'm digressing, but there's a video on YouTube where there's like, shows you all the planets in our solar system, and then it gets to this big thing. And the thing is bigger than that. It's 20, you know, and before you know it, the Earth is like a little dot, and then next thing you know, you can't even see Earth. And I just sat there watching that, terrified, like, oh my God, is that really what's happening? But it sparked something in me to try and learn a little more. And now the little section I was trying to write, it was just 2 paragraphs, folks. Oh my God. But the section I tried to write, like now, but it sounds like I might actually know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
well,
And that's the important thing. You don't want to be an imposter. You know, we sometimes have imposter syndrome. We feel like we don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know what we're talking about. Who are we to try this? But all you need to do is give it a little respect and do some research, and you can write anything.
I think the other thing that's really valuable with Nano is for people who have started a million stories but not finished any of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've had people say that, you know, I have all these notebooks and I get, you know, 1/3 of the way through or 2/3 of the way through, and I give up because I don't know where it's going, or I get stuck and I don't know how to get past that. And they've never finished anything.
Mm-hmm.
Nano can be the inspiration to actually get to the end and feel what it's like to finish,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not ready to ship out the door to a publisher, but you hit the end. And that
I was one of those people.
I
I was
mean,
one of those people. That was one of the most important things Nano did for me, is to get to the end and go and be able to look back at the rest of the story and go, okay, I don't have to know every single thing to get to the end. I just kind of have to know where the end is and get to the end. And then I can go back and fill in those other things.
Mm-hmm.
The 50,000 words I wrote for Nano turned into 115
Wow.
in the final story, but I had the basics. I had the skeleton. And for me, Nano was a huge, I mean, that story is still under the bed. It will never see the light of day. But that first time getting to write the end, wow, that is huge. That's absolutely huge.
I think resetting I'm sorry, Jim, but resetting the expectation for what success is important. going into Nano and saying, for success for me is to finish, then that is success. It's not publishing. It's not selling, 200,000 books in the first 2 months. That's not, that's great. That's extra, that's additional.
And for some people, it may just be, I wrote every day, whether that was 15 words or that was 1,500 words or 15,000 words. I wrote every day.
Yeah.
And especially for somebody who has a job and right now teaching kids at home or monitoring homework.
Oh my gosh, please. Stop quoting my life. Thank you. Oh my God, I can't.
Well,
all of the current situation has totally, for those of us who are regular writers already, speaking to you all who are starting, it's changed all of our routines completely.
Yes.
So we're all back in the state of learning how to navigate, how to write in our current world. And so sometimes success for me on a given day may be, I actually opened the document and read what I had written and wrote 2 pages. Sometimes that is like, woohoo, open the champagne. Because I actually got to sit down and work today. But for, because I'm not used to having 3 people in my house all day, every day.
That's
for
right.
months.
That's right.
But and concentrating is not. No. But for other people, it may be what Nancy was saying. I opened up Wikipedia, or I opened up the CDC.gov, or I opened up, NASA's website and looked at the planets, and I scribbled down the basics of an outline. That may be a huge success for whatever day you might have. And God, heaven only knows our November is going to be very interesting, and NaNoWriMo will be interesting because of it. So,
Well, I'd like to pick up I'm sorry, Jim, before we move on, I'd like to pick up on something that Gail said that really ties in with what everybody said about success. Because I see people post on Twitter, I really want to start writing, and maybe they have started writing, but they don't want to show it to anybody. And they feel for some reason that they're obligated to. No, whose book is this anyway? If you're holding back from doing a writing blitz like Nano because of expectations of people around you, whether that expectation is that, well, now you're ready so you can send out your query from people who understand nothing about revision, or, oh, let me see it from people who understand nothing about polishing and being ready to put things out into the world. And so even if your success is, I finished, that's your success. Nobody else around you gets to redefine it for you. And so that popped into my head as everybody was talking. And I think it's important for people to realize that it really doesn't matter what the people around you think. It matters how happy you are with what you've done.
And I'm certain there is nobody sitting here who has a book underneath the bed that no one has ever seen and no one will ever see. No one here has one of those at all, I'm certain.
I don't know what you're talking about now, Jim.
And for those of you younger writers who have never actually had to print out an entire manuscript to send off for a query, you must understand that in the ancient days, we used to have to print out the entire manuscript, bind it up, and send it off to the publisher if they wanted to see the full manuscript. Well, sometimes you printed that out and then you immediately stuck it in a box under the bed.
That's right.
Because it wasn't going nowhere.
No.
See, we had to put it on papyrus, but that was my So, Jeannie, since you are an avid pantser, let's talk a little bit about plotting. So,
well, I mean, really, I probably still wouldn't plot much if I didn't have to make deadlines. And sometimes, because I'm now indie published rather than publishing with my New York publisher, the deadlines are self-imposed. But I feel an obligation if I say that I'm going to put it out. I feel an obligation to do so. And that's actually one of the reasons I got the Rachel Aaron book, the 2,000 to 10,000. And it's extremely cheap. I had heard a talk about how to write faster, how to kind of get the clutter out of the way. And it kind of dovetailed along with learning how to plot just enough that I don't get bored, because you have to try these things. You have to try stuff to see if it helps you write better. And like I said, I teach a plotting class because I've tried just about every plotting method, barring the 2x2 sticky notes. I never did do that. But I was in a critique group when I first started out, and they all wrote a chapter and sent it around for critique. And then the next week they wrote a chapter and sent it around for critique. And this is how I learned that I will never finish a novel if I send it around for critique, because it will become their book and not my book.
That's right.
And because my book isn't finished, chapter 1 is not done until the end is written.
That's
Because
right.
I'm just as likely to go back and change chapter 1 as I get to chapter 20. So for me, that kind of, I had to learn that didn't work. I had to try it. Didn't work. I come from a corporate background. So for me, my training was go find somebody who does what you want to do, find out how they do it, repeat what they do, and you will have the same kind of success. Let me just tell you, that does not work in writing. You have to find the way that works for you because it's your book and your way to write it. So I had to learn that pantsing was good for me, but I had to know the end. And once I learned that, I had to learn that I also kind of needed to know the turning points. And I'm in a plotting group now where a couple times a year, and of course, given the situation, it's now by Zoom, we get together, 4 of us, write in completely different genres. We get together and we plot books using Michael Haig's technique. And that's, if you want to find anything about Michael Haig, who's fascinating, he's storymastery.com. And he has a thing where you break things into acts and turning points and stuff. But for me, that W plot is absolutely the thing I use every time. Where am I going? Arizona. Okay, good. What's the halfway point from Washington? St. Louis. Okay, what's the quarter point? Somewhere in West Virginia. So if I can kind of know those things, then I don't get bored. I don't know the whole story, so it's still a surprise and still fun. But for me, to get to the end and not, like Gail said, have thousands of notebooks with the story starts and 35,000 words, but only that being the first chapter. I have to plot at least just a teeny bit just to know where I'm going. Now, like I said, there may be some folks out there who are starting Nano who really want to use this last week of October, last couple weeks of October, to do a little research or to do some plotting or do some character sheets like you were talking about, Jim. And that's all great, but also know that you don't have to do that.
Yeah,
no one's going to check your work. That's the other thing. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like Nancy said, this is for you.
Right. No one's checking your work. I mean, you're writing the way that's best for you. I think you said that. Well, who said that? Someone said, right? Oh, you said that, Jeannie. Whatever is best for you. And by the way, you can still wear the Pantsers Unite t-shirt. I promise. You're still doing it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Still pantsing mostly.
Still pantsing. I mean, I think that writing, there's such a misconception. Again, it's defining success, but it's more than that. It's deeper, right? I mean, when you start to write, you are writing because you want to write, not because now you said you were going to start, so everyone's expecting you to do it. You're putting that stress on yourself. Okay. If you keep talking to people and saying, yeah, I need to write, you're creating it, but no one is waiting for you to finish just because you said you were about to begin. This is a thing that you're doing for yourself. And then once you do write it, however you write it, if you've created character arcs and written them all down and diagrammed it, I've seen that before too, which was really interesting, but not for me still. But if you've diagrammed it, you don't turn that in. There is no professor waiting for you to see it, grade it, and say, no, adjust this. That is you sort of having a brain dump, if you will, so that you can move forward. In the end, again, the finished product, the process, the journey itself, which is the most fun, and people negate that. They want from beginning to end, and that's what they're looking towards. That whole middle is where the meat is.
The fun.
After you're done, and if you wanted to move into publishing, well, that's to me where the work begins. Then, I mean, it's just querying and, oh my goodness.
Editing and editing.
Well, you've done.
I actually like editing.
Then you've got the editing and you might need to kill some things that you don't want to kill, cut some things you don't want to cut, and because the contract or the editor is saying this, and if you want this contract, then you're going to do that, blah blah blah. Those are things you have to consider, but that's a different part of the process.
That's
the writing process, that's where you should be enjoying yourself and being your true self in your work.
Yeah, that critique group I mentioned earlier, where they, send a chapter around, that began to feel like school and like I was getting graded. And I kept trying to change it to please the teacher. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, this is my story. I don't give a roaring rat's what anybody thinks about it, because, and they can't, I'm letting them change my story.
Yes.
Why am I letting someone else tell me how to write this book? And I was very polite and very nice and excused myself from the group, because that worked for them. Putting that expectation and pressure and accountability worked for them. It did not work for me.
Right.
And I think that's such a part of figuring out, don't let anybody discourage you from writing if writing is your passion. And if you try something like that, or somebody tells you you have to write a certain way, run as fast as you can away from that person.
I think the other thing here is, and Nano is good, with the daily quotas and all that, because there are times, no matter how much you love writing, that you're not in the mood. You have a headache, you didn't sleep well, there's a lot of chaos going on and you feel all jangly, whatever it is. And another author that we all know well, John Hartness, always says that he doesn't believe in writer's block because plumbers don't get plumber's block and electricians don't get electrician's block. They don't say, boss, I'm not coming to work today. I just don't feel like, putting the pipes together.
Right.
They go to work. It may not be their best day ever, but they go to work. And so there are times when you have all the outlines, you've thought about all the stuff, you've got the research, and you sit there in front of the screen and go, I'm not into this today. And that's where you have to be able to give yourself permission to, as I think of it, throw up all over the page, just vomit all over the page, not literally, but words, just write. And promise yourself that tomorrow, since nobody's going to see this except you can delete everything if it's crap. So you just puke all over the page in words and then stop when you stop. On the days when I do that, I come back the next day and I go, well, that's not
half bad.
And I have never deleted all of it. I may shift some of it around. I might tweak the wording.
Yeah.
I have never ripped out the whole thing from the day before and thrown it out. And so I still move forward. And that's okay. Some days are like that.
And in Nano, what's important is getting words to page. It's not necessarily even typing the end by November 30th.
Right.
I mean, and one of the other things I'll say about, plotting and outlining tools are really helpful when you go back to the editing process. Even if you pantsed it, you can use the same outlining and editing tools then to figure out where your problems are or how to fix them.
And honestly, so many of those tools, there are some great resources on Pinterest. If you look on Pinterest, now again, don't take that as gospel, but use them as tools if they work for you, for writing, for editing, for all that sort of thing. Now, there are some people who hate synopsis. I happen to love them.
Do you really?
But I do, I love them. People think I'm insane. Most people think I'm insane. But the tools for editing sometimes are so good to look at the story in reverse, to go, okay, the character does that. Let me do a character sheet now that I've got him all written. Let me do a character sheet so that I can go back and intensify that in certain scenes. But I think too, for Nano, more than anything else, Nano should, there's that should word, just be about letting yourself write the story you want to write and play. Just go play.
So Gail, any, words of wisdom for how we, expediting writing, making it faster, cranking the words out the door. especially on the days that you may not be motivated. I mean, you were just talking about, just come out and word salad to the page, but what else have you got that, can help speed up writing beyond the outlining, beyond all the other things? What's the rituals and things that help get you in that mode to sit down and write?
I make a lot of coffee and I drink it all. I mean, if I haven't put down a pot, maybe a pot and a half, it's just not a regular day.
I can actually vouch for that and say that is absolutely true.
We can't have a meeting tomorrow morning until you've had a pot and a half of coffee.
This is true.
Awesome.
I think the thing is, I've learned that when I do get stuck and it feels like I'm slogging through molasses, it means that I am not clear on where this part of the story is going. So I either have to research it or I have to go back and kind of micro outline. It might be a chapter and just go, what really happens here? This happens and then that happens and then the next thing happens. Oh, I forgot about the next thing. That's what I'm missing. Or I need an artifact. Well, what kind of artifact could I find? And then I go out and I start Googling around and I go down one rabbit hole and another. And then all of a sudden there is the perfect thing I didn't even know existed. And now it just sets everything else loose. So that's the biggest thing, is don't just sit there and beat your head against the wall. Figure out what you don't know and then figure out what it ought to be, or find that cool something with research. And that's just going to open up the floodgates again.
Or you can do what I do and blow something up.
That helps.
Anybody else have anything they want to put onto that?
Well, there's one method that I use in a way that's different from the way most people who use it apply it. Storyboarding. Now, I have several friends who do a storyboard, and to do a storyboard, you take a big piece of cardboard, foam board, whatever works for you, divide it into panels, into segments. Each segment's a chapter. This is where sticky notes come in. And you have a different color sticky note for every plot element. And you go through the whole manuscript and you write down in chapter 1, each of the plot elements on a sticky, and you put it in its little board. I can't do that ahead of time. It would drive me totally freaking insane to try to do that. I have my little basic outline and my W plot. But when I get to the end of the book, if I feel like there's something missing, I do that. Because then with the different colors, it gives me a visual cue as to which plot lines fell off where they shouldn't have. And so I don't do it with every book. And I do it more as a revision tool than as a writing tool. But for people who've only used it as a writing tool, they might want to think about using it as a revision tool. And sometimes I use it if I'm stuck, because that means something hasn't flowed through the way it needs to, or I wouldn't be stuck. And that helps me figure out what's missing. So, everybody uses everything, like Jeannie was saying, in their own way. And anybody who says, oh, if you don't do a storyboard ahead of time, I mean, George Lucas does storyboards. How do you expect to be a success if you don't do a storyboard? It's like, go away, just go away.
I had someone tell me once that I needed to know the goal, motivation, and conflict for every single character before I even started writing the book. And I thought, hell, I don't even know at the end of the book sometimes.
Yeah, I heard similar advice. That's too akin to plotting. I can't plan.
Well, and I mean, sometimes it's a matter of you find out the friction between characters. You're like, oh, these guys are best friends that hate each other. Wait, when did that happen? Sometimes you've got to go through the process. And I think that's the thing for me, is you have to find the process that works for you and then trust the process.
Yes.
The stuff that doesn't work, change the process. And Nano is great for test the process.
Yeah, I was going to say that's actually one of the great things about Nano is testing new things. Okay, so last year you did Nano and you outlined everything to the nth degree and you found the goal, motivation, and conflict. And then when you sat down November 1st, you're like, well, this year maybe just dive in without, just jump off without a parachute. Just figure it out on the way down. Because sometimes that jogs things. And Another thing, we mentioned it earlier, and I think I said to El Marie that just try a different genre.
Mhm.
I mean, Nano's about exploration and fun, and I think people take it way too seriously. And as Nancy said, you know, nobody's going to see this but you. Some of my favorite writers actually started out in a different genre.
Wow, really?
And it wasn't until they did something like different and wrote some, you know, often people will come back and say later, oh, it was the book of my heart. Well, does that mean the science fiction story you wrote that I thought was really good wasn't the book of your heart?
Right, right.
But I think that sometimes you do that. And, you know, I have a friend who wrote suspense novels, and then she wrote a historical, and that's where she found her voice. That's where she found her real groove. And so sometimes I think Nano can be about, try these things. Maybe you've been working on these things and it's frustrating you. Well, then let them all go and try something new. Or don't try anything at all. Just sit down in front of the blank page and see what happens.
Well, and something else to think about is, since you are just writing this for you, and maybe you're trying to get unblocked, or maybe this is the first time you're really going to try to write a whole structured story. If it makes it easier for you to explore what it means to put a story together and write it all the way to completion, there is nothing that says you can't write fan fiction for your NaNoWriMo story. If that makes it easier for you as either to unblock because, hey, you know, somebody else has built this world and this character, but I have this idea for this cool story, that's fine. Or if as a starting writer, you need to use those pieces somebody else created to learn how to put a story together, kind of like training wheels, that's okay too. An awful lot of us who write professionally now learned how to put a story or a book-length manuscript together by writing fan fiction. And we learned by showing it to our friends that we could entertain people with our writing. And that gave us confidence to move into writing original fiction and feel like we kind of knew how to do this. So if you're really stuck, but you want to do this and you've got this other story for your favorite show or movie burning in your mind, write that and run with it and see where it goes.
That's a great point, Gail, because sometimes I think people are afraid to start, and people have an idea, or they have a thing that they've been wanting to do, but they don't know how to do it and they don't know where to start. And fan fiction is such a marvelous way to just sort of step into the world that's already created. You don't have to worry about world building. Oh, Lord, that's a rabbit hole. And Nancy knows how much of a rabbit hole it is for me. But like you said, stepping into somebody else's universe, whether that's all the fan fiction for Twilight or Supernatural or Lucifer or any of these great shows that are on right now, and creating a story set in that world. Wow, that's super fun and freeing, because you don't have to do, you can just write your story within that realm.
Or if it's
And
something
nobody
like,
sees it but you. So,
and if it's something like Firefly, then you get to finish off the series the way that you wanted to see it.
Well, that's a lot of fan fiction,
Yeah.
I think. I belong to what's called an amateur press alliance called Interlac. It's kind of like a giant chain letter for adults. And you send in your contribution to the central mailer every 2 months, and he or she sends it out to everybody. And I started writing my first book when I got out of school. And I got to the middle and realized I didn't know what to do. And I wasn't plugged into writers groups, so I didn't know, we'll just kill somebody or blow something up and that'll get you moving again. So I didn't know what to do. And so a lot of people in Interlac wrote fan fiction. So I turned to writing fan fiction, Legion of Superheroes fan fiction, and Batman Family, Teen Titans fan fiction. And it's like Jeannie said, because you're stepping into somebody else's world. And another big thing is you can't market it, because you don't own the trademark. And so you better not be out there marketing it. And so it takes all the pressure from that off. And fan fiction writers in general, I think, tend to flesh out the characters, especially with comic book characters who don't get fleshed out except over the course of maybe 40 or 50 issues. You can do that fleshing out on the page. And you get practice learning pacing and dialogue and story elements. And my husband walked in one day while I was working on the last part of this multi-part Teen Titans epic. And he said, he looked at it, and to save money, I'd print it off 2 columns to a page in times 8 point. He said, how many manuscript pages is that? And I said, well, it's probably about 4. And he said, if you took all these parts, and translated them into manuscript pages, how many pages would it be? And I said, well, somewhere between 400 and 500. And he kind of nodded and he went, tell me again why you can't write a book. And I would love to say I then wrote my first book and it sold like hotcakes, but I wrote my first book and no one wanted it. And I look at it now and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that not only did I send it out for people to read, I asked them to give me money for it. But you know, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the fan fiction. I learned a lot from writing that first book. I learned a lot from writing that second book, which was a sequel to the first book, which when the first book didn't sell, it kind of got left on the tree. But I think fan fiction is a great way to develop your skills, and it takes all the pressure of, I need to be able to sell this off, because if you go to sell that, somebody's lawyers are going to be on your doorstep. And so you just write it.
So, you know, and so last piece I kind of want to dive into is, and Marie, you started down this path earlier, is talking about how do we tackle this from a timing perspective? How do we deal with this? Because 2020 makes what is normally for November a busy month. You know, we get into holiday seasons and Black Friday and shopping and all the stuff that goes on. And then this year, you know, Jeannie's got an entire family or house full of people that never leave. Like all the rest of us, people never leave and go away. You know, how do you deal with that? How do you tackle that? How do you set up and manage to block your time?
Mhm.
And the other thing I think is important here is, what do you do if the rest of the family is not supportive of what's important to you in the writing? And because like you say, if it's not a burning need to do this, it's going to be hard to finish. So I mean, if you've got that burning need and you're trying to work around all the rest of this, so how are you going to tackle it this year?
So, I mean, let me say this, the burning need for some of us, it's present immediately, right? With others, it's not, but you can tell you want to do something, you can kind of feel it. That'll cultivate. And as it cultivates, you're going to have to figure out a way to make time to actually do the thing that's sitting in your mind to do. And yes, with this current unpleasantness, it's very difficult to do, because like, you know, just like Jeannie, I've got a house full and they don't leave, and there's schoolwork, and there's, I mean, you know, then there's meetings for this, there's schoolwork for that, there's deadlines for the stories, but then there's, you know, if some of us are working full time, there's regular work requirements that are, you know, can be new to us if we're working from home all of a sudden, you know. So there's bandwidth because everyone in your neighborhood is home. So now everything is slowed down or cut off right in the middle of something you were researching. You know, these are realities now that we have to sort of deal with. And it's difficult. It can be difficult to juggle. So I'll tackle the last part of the question first. What if your family's not supportive? I mean, I'm lucky in that they are. But you know, if you have young ones, they're supportive, but they're young. I mean, you know, they still want you have to cook. First of all, they still want some time with you, right? And they still have some of their needs. I mean, their world is upside down now too. So navigating all this can be difficult. I've said recently, I'm coming off of a con weekend where I was in my office like the whole time participating on the con. And I would turn my camera off and turn myself on mute and have kiss breaks. And people would come in and give me kisses. I'd hug them. Then they'd walk away. You know, I'd come back. Because what they understand now is that the burn is real. I have to do this. There are things that we all need to do for ourselves. I don't want to look at TikTok. You do. You know, that's how you want to spend your time. And it's important to you. I don't care how you outfitted your car in this video game. You do, and you wanted that time for it. I need to write 1,000 words. And you don't care, but I do. So let's all take, and what we do is we designate time, which is difficult for me because my best writing time is late, like 1 o'clock in the morning. So then the house is empty, quiet. I can do what I want, right? So I still get my time. But in the show of we have to make space for each other, we all do whatever it is we really want to do for 1 hour, whatever that hour is. Could be 3 in the afternoon, could be 7 in the evening, could be, you know, on Saturdays, 10 in the morning, whatever. But each of us is doing something separately. So I may get a few thousand words down. The one kid's outfitting a car, another kid's making TikTok videos, my husband's doing whatever, I don't really know. That his hour changes. Whatever he's doing in that hour is never the same. So we carve it out because it's important to each of us. So the importance level, making sure that everyone understands, I have stuff I need to be doing for me. That is not, I'm not excluding you, but we all have things that are important to us, and we've kind of got to give each other that room to do it. So let's all do it in the same hour and call it a day. Then the fact is they go to bed 1 o'clock in the morning and I am typing or I am researching, and that's my normal hour for that though. Now, remaining motivated in the sort of oddness of the world now. You know, I'm a horror author, so this is, and I'm not, interestingly enough, I'm actually not writing about the stuff that's going on because everybody will be doing that, and that's not, I write psychological horror, so unless I approach it from that, you know, angle, I'm not going to be writing anything about that. But motivation is motivation, right? You are home potentially, you know, you really still want to write, you've got work challenges, you've got this, but that motivation to write didn't diminish because you suddenly are transitioning from home or from out in the office to home. It's still there. So it's recognizing the fact that, oh, I still want to do this. And maybe I do need a hobby now, because you can consider it that in the beginning. It won't say that, but you can consider it that in the beginning to get you kickstarted, because now we all do need a little something. I mean, I tried to learn to play guitar. I don't know how to play guitar still. I tried though. I started, didn't work.
TikTok. We want to see it on TikTok.
Yeah, the day you see me on TikTok, don't hold your breath. Let me just put it like that. But, you know, I'm saying, you know, we all, if you want to look at it like a hobby, fine. Trick yourself into thinking that's what it is. Whatever it is, maybe this program, Nano, will kickstart you into doing it as the hobby. And then you will have actually started to make real or make true the goal you've been thinking about for years, months, however long it is. We all need a little something now. Right? Just like that hour I carve out with my family for each of us to do that thing. We all need a little something. So don't suppress that. Just embrace it.
Anybody have anything else you want to?
I just want to tell you, they actually stay out of here when I get that hour. Can you believe?
Well, I think Elle-Marie's got the hit it right on the head, is that you've got to prioritize, and you've got to make what you do as important to you and as real to you as any other day job. Or, you know, if you respect your day job and you're going to carve out a certain amount of time to do your work at home that you would normally be doing at the office, then you need to respect what you're doing as a writer just as much and value it just as much. And I know that's hard, but it is something that you have to come to terms with and say, this has just as much value as a TikTok video or playing, you know, doing math homework or, or, you know, whatever else it is. This has just as much value as cooking dinner. So you have to make it as important to everyone else as it is to you.
Anybody else want to add to that one? Well, and I know we've gone kind of long, but the last thing I want to throw out there is all of you guys that have just gone and won Nano, and you're going to come back and rewatch this video at the end of this going, well, okay. So all of you guys that have just won Nano, you've now got your manuscript. You've got it sitting here. It's, you know, you can kill an ant with it. You can kill a gnome with it. If you've got that sitting there ready to go, now what? What's your one?
Edit. edit,
Yep.
edit.
I mean, I don't know, can you see this? Because I'm a fan of this. It's right here. That's what's next.
Do
Without a
not,
doubt. I mean, I think that as soon as I finish writing something, I give myself 24 hours, maybe 48. But thing is, I'm so in love with the story by the time it's done that I can't wait to start again, because it's like reading it fresh. I don't go back and read what I've written before I begin writing normally in a day, unless I just really can't remember what I was doing. For some reason, I had a long break. So when I'm done, page 1 is like brand new to me. So I sit down and I start reading, and then the red pen comes out almost immediately. And I'm like, oh, dear God. It's time to edit. But that is what's next. I mean, and it's part of the process, and like or lump, whatever you feel about it, you have to do it. Like, it's part of it. Writing is writing, and it's editing, and it's researching, and it's reading it again. It's all of those things. So yeah, just get ready for some editing.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, and especially like we were all mentioning research at various points, is you get to the end, and a lot of times you realize by the end, wow, I don't know anything about that. And I wrote it, just kind of seat of the pants, wrote that the rocket ship goes this way.
Right.
But I might want to go check and see if they actually use napalm as fuel, because I'm thinking no. Because sometimes you throw something in there just to keep the story moving well. When you're revising and editing, you go, you better go do
Coke and Mentos will not get you into an orbit.
Right.
Well,
it. Sure does make a fun fountain.
what I do that makes it easy for me to find those things is, if I throw something in there just because I've got to have something in there and I want to move along, is I put double brackets around it, because it's really easy to search double brackets.
Mhm.
And then your computer will pull it up, and sometimes you look at it and you go, I was thinking, what here exactly?
You're so much nicer to yourself. I literally write in all caps, this is not right, look this up.
It's also very easy to search the words, insert scene here that does this.
Yeah, I've been known to just go ahead and highlight it in red. My mother was an English teacher, so
It's easy to search a highlight in red too, but if you put insert scene here,
Yep.
that's real easy to search.
the word
put-
yeah,
To, if I put an asterisk next to it, I can go through and search on all the asterisks, and then I can find them, and then I know where to go back and fix things.
Mhm.
I actually
There's
cheat because
something-
the asterisk is a wild card, so I always just use like a $ hashtag, because
See,
that you can
that's
find.
so clever. But what El Marie was saying about editing reminded me of something that I thought about as we were starting. And if you are intending to market this book with an eye toward a publisher buying it, it's really important as you start editing to know where you want this book to be in the market. Because as you edit it, that's your chance to shape the story so that it fits the genre, like we were talking about before. And I imagine we've all heard writers say, well, I'm just going to let the publisher decide what the market niche is. No, because if you don't know what the market niche is, you haven't written it to fit the market niche, and it's going to get you bounced really quickly. I mean, just because they ask for the full manuscript, it doesn't mean they're going to read it. It means they're going to read until they find a reason to stop reading, and then they're going to say, no, thank you. So I think people don't worry about the market during Nano when you're trying to blitz through and put words on the page. But if this is a book you were intending to market, then have that in mind. I think when you edit it, it'll increase your chances of success.
Mhm.
Good advice.
And please do not send it out to market on December the 1st.
And never, ever, ever send it out to market without having an editor and a copy editor
Mhm.
Gosh. Oh my goodness.
who
yeah.
is not your sister, your mother, or some other best friend type person.
Right.
My sister is very happy to wield my mother's red pen, and wield it with malice. Anyway.
Well, that's because she's your sister. And you're her brother.
So, we appreciate everybody coming on for the evening. I think it's been a fantastic conversation about nano and getting everybody primed and ready to go. So if everybody can tell where we can find you guys, and Nancy, I'm going to start with you this time.
You can find me on the internet at www.nancynorthcott.com. You can occasionally find me on Facebook, where I'm Nancy Northcott author. And you can often find me on Twitter, where I'm at Nancy Northcott and spend way more time than is good for me.
Gail?
You can find me online at gailzmartin.com and at morganbryce.com. My Twitter names are based on those two names. I'm on Facebook the same way. My reader groups are Shadow Alliance for the Gail and Larry stuff, and Worlds of Morgan Bryce for the romance stuff. And if you put in those two names, you'll find me pretty much everywhere.
Elle Marie?
You can find me at elmariewood.com. I'm also on Twitter at elmariewood1, the number 1, and Facebook at elmariewood. Kind of branding myself there.
Jeanne?
JeanneAdams.com. Like Nancy said, I spend way too much time on Twitter, so you can find me there at Jeanne Adams. And it is Jeannie without an I, even though it's pronounced as if it had one. You can also find me on Instagram and Pinterest.
And I want to thank my panelists tonight. We've been a little fun and gotten a little punchy too. And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, of course, here at Continual. You can find me as James P. Nettles III on Facebook. I occasionally show up on the hive of scum and villainy that is Twitter and other places as well. So thanks, everybody. Good luck with Nano and plan to win. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.